Have you ever noticed how some people seem to change a room without saying a word? They don't raise their voice. They don't argue. They simply stop responding, and suddenly, everything changes. The energy shifts. People grow restless, confused. They chase. They provoke. They wonder. It's as if their silence speaks louder than words ever could. Now imagine if you did the same. What would happen if you stopped reacting immediately to everything around you? What would shift if you chose silence instead of justification, stillness instead of explaining, presence instead of pleasing? This right here is where the transformation begins. The moment you stop being constantly available emotionally, mentally, energetically, you begin to see the world for what it really is, and more importantly, you begin to see yourself. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves." But what about everything that drains us? What about all the little moments we offer our energy to others without realizing we're emptying ourselves in the process? Most of us live in a constant loop of response. Someone texts, we reply. Someone complains, we comfort. Someone disrespects us, we defend. And at the end of the day, we're exhausted, not because we did too much, but because we gave too much of ourselves away. But here's the truth no one tells you: your constant availability is not a virtue. It's a vulnerability. And the more you offer yourself without discernment, the more you become a tool for others to use, a mirror for their projections, a button for their emotional release, a character in a story that isn't even yours. This episode isn't about cutting everyone off. It's not about becoming cold or indifferent. It's about remembering that your energy is not infinite, and your peace is not negotiable. It's about what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming whole, authentic, and untouchable from within. So if you've ever felt tired for no reason, if you've ever felt like the world is constantly taking and rarely giving back, this is your moment. The moment you realize that being unavailable is not rejection, it's resurrection. Let's begin. From a young age, most of us were taught that being available equals being good. Be a good friend. Be a good partner. Be a good child. Say yes. Reply quickly. Smile when it hurts. Help even when you're drowning. The more accessible you are, the more valuable you're told you'll become. But Jung would challenge that assumption. Because what looks like love is often performance. And what feels like kindness can sometimes be self-abandonment. You begin to mold yourself into what others need. You respond before thinking. You give before checking if you even have anything left to offer. You stretch your presence across 1,000 moments where silence would have been wiser. And somewhere in that process, you disappear from your own life. People begin to expect your availability. They come to rely on your yes, your comfort, your energy. And without realizing it, you become less of a person and more of a function, an emotional vending machine that dispenses validation, attention, or advice on demand. Carl Jung called this mask you wear, the persona, the false identity you craft in order to fit in, to be liked, to be accepted. But the more you live through this mask, the further you drift from your true self. And the persona always comes with a price. That price is quiet. It's subtle. It shows up in the fatigue you can't shake, the frustration you can't name, the moments where you feel invisible in rooms where you're always present. You're always on, yet no one truly sees you. You're always giving, but rarely receiving. Why? Because being too available makes you predictable. And everything predictable becomes background noise. The people around you begin to assume your presence, expect your emotional labor, take your sacrifices for granted. And slowly, what once felt like connection becomes an unspoken contract where your worth is measured by your usefulness. Let's be honest. How many times have you said yes just to avoid conflict? How often have you listened to someone vent not because you wanted to, but because you felt obligated? How many times have you shown up when all you wanted was rest? You do it out of fear. Fear of being called selfish. Fear of disappointing someone. Fear of losing a relationship that might not even be real. And so you abandon yourself in small ways, again and again, believing it makes you a better person. But it doesn't. Because at the end of the day, you don't feel closer to people, you feel emptier. You don't feel appreciated, you feel used. You don't feel loved, you feel tolerated, as long as you're convenient. There's a painful truth here: the more available you are, the less people value you. And no one respects what they don't have to earn. Abundance without boundaries turns into invisibility. And the people who claim to need you the most are often the ones who respect you the least. But here's the question Jung would ask: why are you giving so much to those who give you so little? Because deep down, you've been taught that love is earned through sacrifice. That your presence buys affection. That your usefulness guarantees security. But that's not love, that's survival. It's time to question this script. It's time to realize that availability is not the same as intimacy. That giving is not always generous if it costs you your center. And that being loved starts with being seen, and to be seen, you have to first reclaim yourself. So what happens when you stop being so available? The game changes. The energy shifts. The people who depended on your yes begin to confront your no. And in their confusion, something profound is revealed, not about them, but about how little of yourself you've been saving for you. Carl Jung didn't see the human mind as a machine that simply reacts to the world. He saw it as an intricate system of psychic energy, a limited reservoir that fuels our thoughts, emotions, and choices. And like any energy system, it needs direction. It needs conservation. It needs intention. But most of us live like we're running on unlimited fuel. We react to everything. We defend ourselves against every criticism, respond to every message, explain ourselves to people who aren't even listening. Every moment we do this, we spend a little more of our energy, and often, we get nothing in return. Think of your psychic energy like a currency. Every time you argue with someone who doesn't deserve your time, you spend it. Every time you try to justify your feelings to someone who never cared to understand them, you spend it. Every time you respond immediately out of guilt, fear, or habit, you spend it. And then, at the end of the day, you wonder why you feel so depleted. You tell yourself it's work. Or lack of sleep. Or stress. But the truth is more invisible, more insidious. You've been emotionally bankrupt for a long time, because you've been investing in people and situations that only withdraw from you. Jung warned us that which you resist, persists. When you constantly react, you don't resolve anything, you reinforce it. You bind yourself to the very things that drain you. The arguments, the guilt, the shame, the need to prove yourself, these are not just emotional habits. They are energy leaks. And when you leak energy long enough, something dangerous happens: you become vulnerable. Not just tired. Not just overwhelmed. Vulnerable in the way that manipulators can smell. Opportunists can sense. People who know how to trigger you don't need to raise their voices or force you to do anything, they just need to press the right emotional buttons. And because you're reactive, because you're exhausted, you respond the same way every time. This is not weakness. It's misdirection. You've simply never been taught to manage your psychic energy. No one taught you that your silence could be protection. That your delay could be strategy. That your refusal to engage could be power. Instead, you've been conditioned to always fix things. To smooth over tension. To reply, reassure, rescue. And that makes you a perfect target for emotional exhaustion. But here's where change begins: in awareness. Every time you feel the urge to respond instantly, pause. Ask yourself, is this worth my energy? Every time you feel the need to explain yourself, ask, am I trying to be understood or just accepted? Every time you feel pulled into a discussion, ask, will this nourish me or drain me? This is not about avoidance. It's about discernment. The truth is, not every battle is worth your sword. Not every message deserves your reply. Not every wound needs to be reopened just to prove that you've been hurt. And once you begin to guard your energy, something subtle but profound shifts. You'll start to notice the patterns, the triggers, the reactions, the emotional loops you've been trapped in for years. You'll see how much of your life has been controlled by impulse rather than intention. This awareness alone is powerful. But paired with discipline, it becomes transformation. Because when you stop reacting, you start observing. And in observation, you begin to reclaim what was always yours: your focus, your attention, your strength. So the next time someone pushes your button, let the moment pass. The next time you feel an urgent pull to reply, let the silence do the talking. And the next time you sense your energy being hijacked, take a breath and redirect it back to yourself. Your psychic energy is not infinite. It is precious. Sacred. And the moment you begin to treat it that way, your entire reality starts to change. There's a moment, maybe subtle, maybe seismic, when you finally stop reacting. When someone pushes, and you don't push back. When someone accuses, and you don't defend. When someone demands, and you simply don't respond. At first, it feels like weakness. It feels like surrender. But it's not. That moment is power. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He believed that true transformation doesn't come from reacting to the world, it comes from stepping back, observing the pattern, and choosing something different. That is not cowardice. That is sovereignty. Because the people who manipulate you don't need control, they need predictability. They need you to keep playing the same role: the comforter, the explainer, the one who always says yes. They don't need to overpower you. They just need you to keep responding on cue. And when you stop responding, the game breaks. That's when you see the truth. The relationships built on guilt. The conversations designed not for connection, but for control. The emotional patterns that have replayed for years because you kept giving the same reaction to the same triggers. You thought you were being kind. You thought you were maintaining peace. But really, you were being used gently, silently, with a smile. Jung called this mechanism projection, the psychological act of placing one's unacknowledged emotions, fears, and desires onto another person. And when you're always available emotionally, mentally, energetically, you become the perfect canvas for those projections. People don't see you. They see the image they've cast onto you. The savior. The empath. The fixer. The one who never gets angry. And the more you fulfill that image, the more you disappear behind it. This is why withdrawal is so powerful. Because it erases the projection. It removes the mirror. And without your usual reaction, people are forced, for the first time, to face their own reflection. And not everyone can handle that. They may accuse you of changing. They may call you distant, cold, arrogant. But what they really mean is, you're no longer playing the role I assigned to you. Your withdrawal is not the problem. Their dependency is. Let that truth settle in. Because when you stop responding, when you stop feeding the emotional loop, something radical happens: people no longer know how to relate to you. The scripts they used no longer work. The buttons they pressed no longer react. And that, more than anything, disorients them. But disorientation is necessary for growth. Your silence forces others to sit with their own discomfort. And yes, some will leave. Some will lash out. Some will try harder to provoke you. Not because you're wrong, but because your refusal to react threatens their illusion of control. Jung said, "We do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And this is exactly what happens when you withdraw. You stop shining your energy into their wounds, and those wounds start screaming in the dark. But what about you? Are you ready to face what happens next: the silence, the distance, the discomfort of being misunderstood? Because let's be honest, when you stop being functional for people, some of them disappear. Not because they never cared, but because they only cared in ways that benefited from your availability. When that stops, so do they. And yes, it will hurt. It will feel like loss. But it is not the loss of love, it is the clearing of illusion. You are not here to carry everyone. You are not here to soothe everyone's chaos. You are not here to be a mirror for projections that don't belong to you. You are here to become whole. And that process starts not when you fight, but when you step back. Not when you yell, but when you go quiet. Not when you explain, but when you simply walk away. Withdrawal is not escape. It is evolution. And the moment you choose it, everything begins to shift, not just around you, but within you. The modern world fears silence. We fill every space with noise, messages, notifications, debates, explanations, apologies. There's pressure to respond instantly, to stay visible, to prove your point before someone else defines it for you. But silence? Silence unsettles. It threatens. It shifts the power. Carl Jung understood this better than most. He didn't see silence as passivity. He saw it as amplified presence. Not an absence of voice, but a deeper form of voice, one that doesn't require volume to carry weight. Because when you choose silence intentionally, you're not retreating from the world. You're stepping fully into yourself. You begin to observe instead of reacting. You notice the subtle patterns in people's behavior, the emotional games, the cycles of neediness, the ways they bait you into giving energy you no longer wish to spend. And the moment you notice, you become free. There's a reason some people panic when you don't reply right away. When you don't explain yourself. When you simply stop talking. It's not because they miss you, it's because your silence has taken away their ability to control the narrative. As long as you're speaking, they can twist your words. As long as you're reacting, they know where to push. But the moment you go still, the rules change. And that terrifies those who relied on your predictability. True silence isn't passive. It is strategic. It is lucid. It is deeply alive. When you hold your silence, not out of fear, but from conscious choice, you reclaim authorship of your energy. You become less available for chaos, and more present with truth. You stop explaining yourself to people who never earned access to your inner world. You begin to understand that every word is an investment, and not everyone deserves a share in your wisdom. This is not arrogance. It's energetic discipline. It is refusing to waste your breath on arguments that only drain you. Refusing to react just because someone expects you to perform emotionally on command. It's saying, I no longer play that role. Not with words, but with silence. Jung called this process individuation, the journey of becoming fully yourself. And silence is an essential part of that journey, because it's in silence that you finally hear what's beneath the noise, the deeper truths, the unconscious patterns, the suppressed voice of your real self. But let's be honest. Silence has a price. When you become quiet, people start projecting. They say you've changed. That you're cold. That you don't care anymore. But what they really mean is, I can no longer read or manipulate you. Your silence removes their control, and forces them to confront their own noise. And that discomfort? It reveals everything. It reveals how much they depended on your imbalance. How often they used your empathy as a doorway to avoid their own pain. How little they respected the boundary between their chaos and your peace. But the most powerful silence isn't the one that unsettles others. It's the silence that rebuilds you from within. It's the quiet in which you remember your worth. The space where you reconnect with your essence, not shaped by demand, but grounded in truth. It's where the masks fall. The noise fades. And for the first time in a long time, you feel whole. This is not isolation. This is sacred solitude. And in that sacred solitude, you begin to transform. Not into someone harder or colder, but someone clearer. Someone who no longer trades authenticity for approval. Someone who understands that presence is more valuable than performance. So let them misunderstand you. Let them question your absence. You don't owe explanations to those who only showed up for your availability. You owe something else to yourself. Your silence is not weakness. It is power. The question is, are you ready to wield it? There comes a moment, after the silence, after the withdrawal, when the world grows quiet and you're left alone with yourself. No more texts to respond to. No more roles to play. No more masks to wear. Just you. And at first, it feels empty. Strange. You might even feel guilty, as if you're abandoning people by choosing yourself. But this isn't abandonment. It's sacred isolation, the kind Carl Jung spoke about as essential to individuation. To truly become who you are, you must first disidentify from the version of you that was built for others. That means leaving behind the persona you wore for approval, the habits you formed to avoid rejection, and the availability you offered just to feel needed. It is not an easy thing, this kind of solitude. The people who once benefited from your presence will begin to distance themselves. Some will try to provoke a reaction. Others will accuse you of becoming someone you're not. But they're wrong. You are not changing into someone new, you are simply returning to someone true. And in that return, a quiet power is born. You begin to realize that you no longer need to perform to feel worthy. You no longer need to be understood to feel valid. You no longer need constant affirmation to trust your own intuition. The world around you may shrink, but your inner world expands. What you lose in popularity, you gain in peace. There's a unique strength that emerges when you learn to be alone without feeling lonely. When you can sit in your own presence and feel complete. That's the strength of wholeness, the kind of wholeness that doesn't need to be filled by others. Jung described individuation as a journey away from the collective, away from external influence, and toward the self, capital S. It's not a journey of ego, but of essence. It requires courage, because it means letting go of everything that made you feel safe, but also kept you small. The people who loved your former self may not know what to do with your new one. And that's okay. Because when you are no longer available for emotional crumbs, you begin to crave something deeper. When you stop performing, the connections that were based on performance fade. What remains is rare, real, and honest, even if it's just with yourself for now. This is where rebirth begins, not with fireworks or grand declarations, but in stillness. In presence. In choosing your peace over your need to be liked. And in that space, you become sovereign. You become someone who walks into a room and doesn't need to prove anything. Someone who can hold space for others without losing yourself. Someone who no longer explains their silence, because your energy speaks clearly enough. So, yes, it might feel like loss. But the truth is, you're not losing people. You're losing illusions. You're not walking away from love, you're walking away from conditions. And when you do, something remarkable happens, you become unshakable. Your self-worth no longer depends on how others treat you. Your inner peace no longer hinges on external validation. And for the first time, you stand in your own presence fully, not as a reaction to the world, but as a whole being, choosing yourself. This is the rebirth Jung hinted at, the return to self after years of fragmentation. It's quiet. It's slow. It's sacred. And it begins when you decide, fully and finally, that you are enough, even in silence. So here we are, on the other side of the silence, the withdrawal, the sacred solitude. And maybe now you see it more clearly. Your availability was never the proof of your worth. Your usefulness was never the same as your value. The love you thought you had to earn was never meant to cost you yourself. Carl Jung taught us that individuation, the process of becoming whole, requires a deep and sometimes painful detachment from the illusions we've carried for years. We must walk away from the roles we were cast in, the expectations that caged us, the projections that made us into characters in someone else's narrative. But this detachment is not destruction. It is liberation. Because when you stop being available for everything and everyone, you become radically present for something else, yourself. You start to feel again, not the chaos of others, but the calm truth of your own inner voice. You begin to listen to your intuition, not your conditioning. You start to see relationships as reflections, not requirements. And for the first time, maybe ever, you begin to live from the inside out. There will be moments when it hurts. You'll miss the attention. The validation. Even the drama. Because it gave you something familiar, even if it cost your peace. But with time, that pain becomes clarity. That emptiness becomes space. And in that space, something extraordinary takes root. Self-respect. Emotional integrity. Quiet power. And that's the power Jung spoke of, not the kind that controls others, but the kind that doesn't need to be controlled anymore. So here's the question. Are you ready to be misunderstood, rejected, even disliked, for the sake of your own peace? Are you ready to stop explaining, stop proving, stop performing? Are you ready to choose yourself not with guilt, but with grace? Because if you are, you will lose things. But you will find something far greater. You will find that when you are no longer available to the world's noise, you become available to your soul. You will no longer need to beg for space, you are the space. You will no longer need to chase love, you are love, returning home. So if this message touched something within you, if it spoke to that quiet, exhausted part of you that's been waiting for permission to let go, then let this be it. You don't need to wait for validation. You don't need to wait for someone to understand. You're allowed to disappear for a while. You're allowed to be silent. You're allowed to rest, to say no, to not show up. And more than anything, you're allowed to choose your peace. So say it now, to yourself or out loud. I choose my peace. Let that be the beginning. Because everything changes when you stop being available.